on the brink. All that we have ever loved and all that we have ever been stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a greater generosity of spirit, a deeper joy in this life we share. Welcome all. So glad to see you. We have a chalice lighting today, and it is the proposed 8th principle. It was created in Philadelphia in 2013, and there are quite a few, the UUA has it now, Black Lives in UU, Blue, and diverse UU ministries, Drum, and others have endorsed this principle and are working to get it added to the first 7. Willard is going to read it for us.
Thank you. Good morning. The 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism as proposed. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian-Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Blessed be.
Thank you. And now Nina's going to read a piece that Sarah Parker Remond wrote and spoke. She was a free Black woman born in Salem, Massachusetts in 1815, and was well known, especially in Europe, for her abolitionist work. In the 1850s, she traveled in the North and shared the platform with her brother, Charles Leonard Remond, Frederick Douglass, and Susan B. Anthony. The following excerpt was from an 1859 speech that she delivered at the Manchester Athenaeum in England, where she was well known. An added note is that she got her Doctor of Medicine in 1871 in Italy and practiced there for many years. Thank you, Nina.
This is from a longer piece, and I hope everybody gets a chance to hear that as well. Such is the state of public opinion in America, and you find the poison running through everything. With the exception of the abolitionists, you will find people of all classes thus contaminated. The whole army and of the United States are pledged to pursue and shoot down the poor fugitives who, panting for liberty, fly to Canada to seek the security of the British flag. All denominations of professing Christians are guilty of sustaining or defending slavery. Even the Quakers must be included in this rule. Now I ask for your sympathy and your influence, and whoever asked Englishmen and women in vain, give us the power of your public opinion. It has great weight in America. Words spoken here and read there are as of no words written in America are read. Lord Brugham's testimony on the 1st of August resounded through America. Your Clarkston and your Wilberforce are names of strength to us. I ask you, raise the moral public opinion until its voice reaches the American shores. Aid us thus until the shackles of the American slave melt like dew before the morning sun. I ask special help from the women of England. Women are the worst victims of the slave power. I am met on every hand by the cry, cotton, cotton. I cannot stop to speak of cotton while women and men are being brutalized.
Thank you, Nina. Now, Amazing Grace by an unlikely chorus.
Amazing grace, how sweet chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved an old wretch, saved an old wretch like me. Yeah, I once was lost, yes, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Yeah.
That was great, right? Next, I would love to introduce you to Dr. Shabazz. And I'll let him introduce himself for those who don't know him. And take it away.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this Sunday morning. I won't say too much about myself. I think we had it in some of the literature that went out or is available to you, but I do teach over at the University of Massachusetts in the W.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies. And let me take time to mention a project that I'm working on with Tom Weiner is a book entitled In Defiance. And one of the chapters concerns Sarah Parker Remon, who we've heard, thank you, Nina, we've heard from a bit of her speech, an excerpt of a speech she gave there in Manchester, England. I want, in my brief remarks today, to try and explore that speech with you a little further and to see of what relevance it may be to our present predicament, our present condition. As has been said, Sarah Parker Remon was born in Salem, Massachusetts in 1826. And I think that if I had to sum up in one word or briefly the question that of this sermon, which is related to the question Remon asks, why slavery is still rampant in the land, it would simply be this: becoming an anti-racist. How do we become an anti-racist human being? Boston dwelling during his most vibrant years in the field as a working class youth between 1939 and 1946, Malcolm X once declared in a class division of there being house, inward, and field Negroes, he defined that I am a field Negro. The masses of African people, he said, come from a separate, hyper-oppressed, wretched of the earth, personal and group experience. Malcolm X became a conscious anti-racist after he went to prison at 21 years of age, prison right here in Massachusetts, and moved from being anti-white in the sense of hating racist whites and being suspicious of the separate and unequal white-dominated world to becoming instead anti-racist. racist. His journey comes and stands on the shoulders of the Massachusetts woman, Sarah Parker Ramon. I'd say that Ramon was born free in a world where people of her color were everywhere in chains, fugitive, and fighting to survive. She was blessed to have been born to a household that was committed to being anti-racist, committed to fighting slavery, committed to being fully human. In the book In Defiance, we relate an episode that occurred in 1853 in which Sarah Parker Ramon acted in defiance of the norms and expectations of white supremacy. She purchased opera tickets for Boston's Howard Athenaeum performance of the comic drama Don Pasquale. Together with two other comrades, particularly Bostonian William Cooper Nell, she decided to enact her first full-blown act of civil disobedience to racism, to white supremacy. Going to the Athenaeum, which now you cannot find it in Boston. If you take the T to Government Center, you get out into this desert of brutalist architecture. In that desert of brutalist architecture is where the Howard Athenaeum once stood. They go to the Athenaeum, they present their tickets, they go to be seated and are escorted to the section that has been reserved for people of their color. They will not abide this and refuse to be seated in that section. This leads to their being ejected from the Athenaeum, in fact, so roughly so that Sarah is pushed down a flight of stairs. In Jim Crow world making, Africans must have racially separate, segregated seats if they are to be allowed at all to a theatrical performance with members of the superior race, the white race. Sarah, William, Cooper, Nell, and other defiant women and men, however, were imagining and creating a different world. The dominant narrative led Howard Athenaeum staff to roughly escort them out of the theater. And we come to a question, did Sarah and her comrades plan such an encounter, knowing that they would be pushed to the Jim Crow section, if at all? Or was she unaware of the policy of segregated seating? In a first draft of our chapter on this, we write, this question is lost to us. The answer to this question is lost, but upon deeper thought, it really isn't. Because the real crucial thing in that moment in 1853, whether planned or whether a decision she arrived at in that very moment, what we see is the civil disobedience of the sort that another Massachusetts person would write about, Henry David Thoreau. That simple refusal, without being violent, without being hateful, without being with any terrorism or malice in your heart, simply refusing to obey unjust laws, unjust expectations, unjust treatment. That is the real point. Whether she had been conspiring to do it for some time or whether she does it in that moment. It's that moment that is really crucial to her becoming anti-racist, fully anti-racist, to move to that point of civil disobedience. Because sometimes you can plan and you can go to the action and you can say, okay, I'm ready for civil disobedience. And then in that moment, you can freeze. In that moment, you can get scared out of your wits. And you can just acquiesce and go along to get along. But with Sarah Parker Remond, again, whether thought through ahead of time or simply enacted in that moment, what is crystal clear is she refused to be dehumanized and mistreated. Or as she says in that Manchester speech, she refused to be brutalized. That speech is poignant, and it comes about 6 years after her act of civil disobedience. She had come to gather a reputation as a great orator herself at a time in which oratory was the principal form of communication, of entertainment, of social, of the public sphere. And she goes to Europe to extend upon this work and to raise funds for the anti-slavery struggle back in the United States. And it is over there, while in Manchester, England, that she gives this speech that attempts to portray what it's like and why slavery is still rampant in the land. I think her answer is complex, is multifaceted. One of the things we hear in the very last line that we read, she says, I am met on every hand by the cry, cotton, cotton. But she says, I cannot stop to speak of cotton while women and men are being brutalized. What we see here is the relationship of capitalism to the brutalization of African people, of capitalism, particularly in the United States, to what is approaching 4 million people in the country. Slavery and capitalism grow up together. They are mutually constitutive. They fuel each other. And it's principally through this crop called cotton. The textiles mills in England, the textiles mills here in Massachusetts are hungry for this cheap raw material that is then turned into cloth, is turned into clothing, is turned into all kinds of products that folks are hungry for, that the world wants. But the cotton is only cheap because the labor is enslaved. The labor that makes it is enslaved. And that is where she says, I can't speak of this question of cotton. I can't speak of capitalism, of its wonders, of its profound transformation of Europe and of the United States of America, making them the superpower centers of the world. I can't speak of this while women and men are being brutalized by that system. Slavery is still rampant in the land because the system of capitalism knows no morality. Its driving impetus is the production of profits for the owners of the capital, for those who assert their relationship to the means of production as the owners and management of those very means of production. As long as their profits are satisfied, that is all capitalism knows. That's all it cares about. So much so that in the 1850s, when she gives this speech, when she makes this act of civil disobedience to anti-Black racism in Boston, it is that economic system that is developing, is, as Bob Marley would say, is prepared to provide your every wish. It's so gratifying. It's so powerful in how it can satisfy your material desires that if you sell your soul to that system, you can know its rewards, but you can be blind, deaf, and indifferent to the immense suffering that is required to give you those products, to give you those, to satisfy those material wishes. And so we come to the question, to the poem that I'd like to leave you with. And it's part of the title I gave my comments today. It's from the poet Frances Harper, who was herself a very important figure. And you know, as Ramon raises, and I say this as part of why I've selected her and why I selected Harper and others, as she says in those words, the people most who have really suffered the greatest are women. She says, now I ask for your sympathy and your influence. Give us the power of your public opinion. It has great weight in America. But she also says how the women are really suffering the most. But here in the words of Frances Harper, these were some lines, poetic lines she had penned to honor Thaddeus Stevens, one of the great members of the US Congress in fighting for the end of slavery and fighting for Reconstruction and Black humanity. Not in vain has been thy hoping, though thy fair ideals fade. If, like one of God's tall aloes, thou art ripening in the shade. There is light beyond the darkness, joy beyond the present pain. There is hope in God's great justice and the Negro's rising brain. Though before the timid councils, God hath bathed his sword in judgment. Though before the timid councils, truth and right may seem to fail, God hath bathed his sword in judgment, and his arm shall yet prevail. As we face this upcoming election, I ask us to think about those words, think about that bit of poetry, and fear not. My final thought I leave you with comes from reading a very powerful, very informative piece entitled "The Black Hole in the White UU Psyche" by Mark Morrison Reed. He wrote this back in 2017. It has some wonderful gems and nuggets in the piece, but I actually go to the comments sections on the piece, in which a commentator writes, while I disagree with the agenda behind this essay, it is really clarifying in its allegation that historically, universalism, rooted in white, rural, working class culture, was less welcoming and more racist than Unitarianism, which was more urban, educated, and affluent. I had already intuited that the current UU embrace of identity politics was a theological move away from our universalist roots, from affirming the worth and dignity of all souls. But after reading this article, I realized that it is a cultural move as well, a further rejection of white working class people in favor of those that are either, number one, people of color, or number two, affluent professional whites. The former are presumed to be free of the sin of privilege, and the latter are psychologically more prepared to confess to privilege, receive absolution, and move forward as white allies. This formula won't work as well as with whites that have experienced economic deprivation or are struggling to stay out of poverty because they don't feel particularly privileged and need a church community for help and support, not condemnation. As we face this upcoming election, where the incumbent seeks to do again this time what he did 4 years ago and play upon the sense of grievance, the sense of being left out, of being left behind, of being forgotten, of the so-called silent majority of working class white men especially. We cannot allow this to happen again. We must address and go to the root of this fallacy, of this fallacious reasoning. We must go to the root of this so-called effort of privileged whites who accept their white privilege, acknowledge their white privilege, and blacks as supposedly against working white people who by their own struggle for economic survival under capitalism, they can't grasp and reject any notion of white privilege. We have to go deeply into this if we are to all move forward, if we are to avoid all of the uproar and civil disobedience and unrest and second civil war that some are touting, whether in the underground of the QAnons and the white alt-right, or wherever it's being touted, or on television, on the news. We have to go to the root of this and really understand, why does anti-Black racism still run rampant in the land? And what do we do about it? And to me, it involves a commitment to understanding we're all oppressed in an economic system that puts profit before people. We're all oppressed, yes, but we must also understand the particularities of an oppressed people who have also been oppressed because of their color. We must understand how race and color is used as a tool of division. But the lessons of that fall most strongly on all of the white community. All classes of the white community must look at that particular struggle and must decide to fight it like Sarah Parker Remond fought it, like Frances Harper fought it, like so many. And that's what we try to do in the book, in Defiance. We have both African Americans and white Americans in there. We're trying to bring forth in this collective biography, collective historical biography, figures that we can look to as role models who acted in defiance of white supremacy, white and Black. When it's out, I hope to share it with you all, share the word on it, and would welcome your input on it the same way I welcome your input or questions to what I've said today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. we will definitely have time for discussion afterwards. We're just going to have one piece of music, and then we continue with Dr. Shabazz. Take it away, Dan.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing. In spite of everything, hear our freedom ring. Our people gonna sing. Our people gonna fight. Our people gonna fight for what we know is right. March into the night. Our people gonna fight. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Whatever you believe, we have the right to breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna pray.
Our people gonna pray.
Our people gonna pray. Take our rights away. See you on election day. Our people gonna pray. Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise.
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 Amen.
Right. We actually have wonderful, lots of time now to talk to Dr. Shabazz and each other. Questions, comments, just speak up. I don't want to call on people, just unmute yourself.
I have to go. My wood guy's here. Thank you, everyone. Peace and love.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
I have a question that I just heard more about the Green New Deal and employment and working towards energy. Well, anyway, the Green New Deal. And I'm just kind of wondering how much what's the coordination? Is this part of the movement?
I will say a few things on that. Others may know more and can add more as well. But my emphasis, my focus on the corporations, on capitalism, also links to not only to the brutalization of Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, but also relates to the brutalization of our environment, the brutalization of our planet. Again, when your concern is profits, is the statement you can bring to your shareholders on how much you've raked in, then externalities of production that may be warming the planet or an existential threat to the planet is somebody else's problem. That's not my problem. My problem is to deliver to the shareholders the maximum dividends, You see? So who cares? Let somebody else figure out that other part, as long as they don't tax me for it, as long as they don't, get too overboard, who cares? So, as long as we continue to maintain an economic system that treats the externalities of production as something that we can socialize the cost of that, but we only privatize the profits. We simply privatize the profits. of the production, but we socialize the externalities and the costs of the externalities. You know, as long as we permit that. But I think the Green New Deal is an attempt to reverse our thinking on that, to reverse our laws, to reverse our approach, to say, no, we're going to build in a way where the energy that is needed for production is as scientifically sound, is as scientifically in harmony with nature, with being able to leave this planet available and well-resourced for 7 generations from now. Not just for us right now, we're doing fine, right? But how are we leaving things for 7 generations from now? The Green New Deal is trying to move us in that direction. Forget a Paris Accord. Okay, that's just a place where people gathered to try and do some of this work. The real question is, where are we on the planet? Where are we in our heart? And that's what I think the Green New Deal is trying to move us around, get us to see that, hey, you know, our friends in Kentucky, you know, they voted for Trump. Most of them voted for Trump last time around. Why? Because they viewed Hillary Clinton as an existential threat to their jobs in the coal industry. All right. While meanwhile, there was no plan, there was no policy, there was nothing that they could look at to say, well, look, we're going to move to close down coal, but we're bringing in jobs. We're going to bring solar factories. We're going to bring things in that will replace those jobs that end in the coal industry. But that wasn't presented. So all people saw is, okay, liberal, progressive, white allies, you know, got it all figured out, and they're going to come and shut us down. And I'm going to be in these jobs that have provided a good living for my family for generations. Not to say anything about the health consequences, but the deaths in the mines, but overall has provided a way of life for us. They're just going to shut it down and we'll be left behind. No, I'm voting for Trump. That's where I think the Green New Deal is trying to come in and to say, no, you know, as we make this change, we're going to also create the jobs that keep people employed. That's what I take away.
I was wondering about the role of religious morality in the treatment of capitalism. I'm thinking back to the 19th century robber barons who had been, you look at Andrew Carnegie, for example, as a person who was a ruthless, capitalism is amoral, but capitalists don't have to be. And we now have a situation where, well, I'd say I grew up in the 50s when there was an underlying assumption that, yes, you make a profit, but you also do all right by your workers who are unionized and they have a right to unionize. I just wondered, there's a lot of religious morality, thinking back to the concept of Jubilee in Judaism and other things. I was wondering if you could comment about tempering capitalism's worst instincts or tendencies with religious faith.
I like your statement, capitalism is immoral, but individual capitalists don't have to be immoral. And I, you know, coming from a family of small business owners and who had grocery stores, who had barbershops, who ran, you know, businesses, what I observed just as a child growing up was along the same lines, that yes, they wanted to make a decent living. They wanted to take care of themselves, be able to send their grandkids to college and all of that. But they also wanted to do right by their workers, many of whom were family members, but some weren't. But they wanted to do right, you know, overall and share from the proceeds in a decent way. So on a small scale, one could raise that to a larger scale. But at the larger scale, however, I think unless those capitalists work to reform the political process and support reform of the political process that takes money out of politics, or then they doom us. The immoral stain still flows back onto them. The Koch brothers and all these people, these mega billionaires, and the Walton family, and Gates, and all of them. I don't know what they're like individually as people. They may be some of the most decent and moral, spiritually moral people that I might ever meet. But unless they work against their own power, as corporations and as capitalists and as super wealthy, then they disfranchise us. And that's what's happened, with the Supreme Court decisions and now the stacking of the court to keep those decisions in place. Citizens United and so on, that allows this money, a massive money, to just control and buy the people who fill Congress and buy the presidency. But I think Pam Kelly was trying to get in, and others.
Hi, hi all, thanks. Thank you, Shabazz. And I would add to that too, is that so many of us have become dependent on Wall Street, if indeed we have, our retirement funds or whatever, and the corporations or universities or whatever that we all work for. And I think that has, we each individually have to look at that too, how that affects us, how that affects capitalism, and how we, even though we are not robber barons or any of the billionaires today, how it affects the system. I mean, Trump, but Obama as well. And, they always speak, how well is Wall Street doing and what's in your 401k? And that all really affects us. And then if we're investing our money in the 401k, what corporations are we doing it in? And so those are questions too that we have to look at all the time. I think individually, I don't have an answer, but boy, we need to come up with one, because it keeps our investments, keep that system rolling along really well, and fooling us that, we're getting somewhere, when in fact it's just creating a greater divide and a greater divide. That's all. Thank you.
I'd like to just jump in and add that, not that I'm defending capitalism as a system, but in the last week's Time magazine, there were two articles, one by the president of the Ford Foundation and another by the new woman CEO of Citibank, which is a global banking system. And both of the articles addressed what they called stakeholders capitalism. And, I was surprised to see it in Time magazine, and I read, to them, stakeholders means the people who are affected by the doings of a company, meaning environmental effects and class effect and labor effect. So here's two leaders in capitalism who are bringing a consciousness forward that I think we really want to see. It's a transition.
Rocky might want to comment there. That's the endowment money and so on for the church is divested from fossil fuels and invested through socially responsible investing. But, and so he might want to comment at another time, but I wanted to say something, which is, I came on maybe a little bit late, Kate, but I'm not really quite sure. And I want to make sure that people have met Willard Lett, who is here with us today. And I'll let him introduce himself, because I'm only, just catching up with Willard. From my own experience, Willard couldn't be better positioned. When I met him, he was in Manchester, New Hampshire, and he was training people, lower income people from basically all over the world in the initiation of businesses and getting really socially responsible small businesses moving, very much like what John Waite does through the Franklin County CDC, and Andrew Baker does training and opening up new jobs for people through the what's Andrew's job called? The worker training program. But the important thing is we are now poised. We are right at this moment when we have many people out of work. And this is an enormous opportunity for us. We could be investing money nationally or even locally or even statewide in getting job training programs moving that we're going to desperately need to make this 10-year transition to a green economy. And it's a huge opportunity, but what we need to do is drive the whole thing, move the job creation program so that people are now going on Zoom and studying to be electricians and plumbers. We're going to need an army of them, electricians, plumbers, contractors, people who are skilled at all kinds of things that we're going to desperately need. And we can do it in Greenfield because we're kind of ahead of the curve a little bit. We've already passed the commercial PACE program. We can develop the follow-up from the community college programs that are needed, the tech school programs. We can develop the actual initial commercial green transition work in this town. It's poised for action. So I don't think we should hold back. We should get moving. And Willard, take it away. I mean, the two of you are just quite a team. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, just a little bit. Thanks, Pam. Pam and I worked here. I'm in Manchester, New Hampshire, on the traditional lands of the Abenaki. And Pam and I worked 10 years ago, something like that, very closely. Currently, for the last 2 years, I've served as the regional lead for the New England region of the UUA. And so you may, if you don't know me, you may know some of my colleagues through the New England region program staff. Thank you so much for Pam for inviting me to today's service. And I've had contact with Brother Shabazz through my work in the reparations movement, actually, in my role with the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. So thanks again, and I'll yield back.
Willard, I'm a little curious of what you know about the eighth principle and where that sits and what's the backstory to, I mean, I never had heard of it before. Pam told me about it, and so that got included in the service. Thank you for reading it, but what's the scoop?
The eighth principle, it has emerged out of the work of lifelong Unitarian and long-term activist Paula Cole Jones, who formulated the eighth principle. And currently, there is a second principle commission being created that will consider the eighth principle. And probably, last I heard, I think sometime next year we'll probably get a report from that commission. Looking at the eighth principle is it also includes a more broad look at the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism and a consideration of just how and when and why they may be changed. However, the eighth principle, one of the challenges with the eighth principle is working to, I'll say this and be quiet, but working to, some people would suggest that the first and seventh principles of Unitarian Universalism should be enough to cover the ground that the eighth principle is proposed to cover, but we can see that it hasn't. And that's what has made the discussion around eighth principle so cogent and timely. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if that was exactly what you were asking.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't want to take away from this important discussion. I just want to say that as I listened to the service, one of the thoughts that came to mind was I need some kind of leadership of what to do to be anti-racist. And right after that thought came to me, another thought was, and that's what stuck with me now, that no, I don't need leadership. I have to figure this out for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. I'd like to read a little bit more of her words, if I could. She says, I speak of the white population mind. Wealth is abundant. The country in every material sense flourishes. In the South, aristocratic feelings prevail. Labor is dishonorable, and 5 million of poor whites live in the most degrading ignorance and destitution. I might dwell long on the miserable condition of these poor whites, the indirect victims of slavery, but I must go on to speak of the 4 million slaves. I'm going to skip that part, but she talks a lot about, in depth, about the different mindsets in the North and the South, and the connection between capitalism and slavery and labor. To describe to you the miserable poor whites of the South, I need only quote the words of Mr. Helper, a Southerner, in his most important work on slavery, and the testimony also of a Virginian gentleman of my acquaintance. The 5 millions of poor whites are all, most of them, in as gross a state of ignorance as Mrs. Stowe's Topsy in Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I just would like everybody to read everything in here, because it's very eye-opening. In that some of the same principles, of course, are still operating right now. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I used to be working at the UUJEC, the Unitarian-Universalists for a Just Economic Community. And we took a trip. We took about 13 people to Basque, Spain, to look at the largest co-ops in the world. And these are co-ops that are so large that they are manufacturing stoves, and they have the 5th largest bank in Spain, or maybe by now it's the 2nd, I don't know. That was a few years ago. So this is a way of democratizing work. It's through the ownership of co-ops. And, you know, here we have the Franklin County CDC that's favoring the development of co-ops. And we have certain co-ops that have developed significantly, like Pioneer Valley Photovoltaics, which when we came here had 2 people working, and now, like maybe 13 years later, has 50 people working. So I think it's a way that we can localize and democratize work, and we should be looking at it more carefully. And we certainly have the right folks around. So I'm pleased, really pleased, to see Willard and hear your presentation, your program today. It's just hot stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Mondragon. Yep,
Wonder who had that.
that it must be Dan.
This is really great to see, really great stuff. I want to pick up on something Willard Lett said, and that and others had mentioned. You know, even if we go back to the Obama years, and as we hopefully look ahead at Biden years, things have got to change. You know, the idea, for example, the question of reparations, Obama didn't touch it. Obama, through no support, gave no signal to the to Sheila Jackson Lee and folks that had put forward HR 40, the bill, the commission to study and provide remedies for reparations, did nothing, and in fact treated it as quote unquote divisive, and had his friend Henry Louis Gates write a piece in the op-ed in the New York Times saying that, you know, reparations was divisive. Now, this was a few years back. This was while Obama was in office. And that was the big defense. You know, Obama's trying to accomplish things so all boats can rise, you know, all boats, the poor white people's boats and the poor black people's boats, all boats can rise. It was all this type of universalist rhetoric. And he wouldn't touch reparations. He wouldn't touch the harm, the historic harm that slavery and anti-black racism has done and is doing, and the systemic nature of the problem. Because he wanted to, even going into his second term, when he didn't have to worry about himself personally needing to be elected again. Now he had to worry about, you know, Hillary's chances or Joe Biden's chances. And so it's always push the question of black people's issues, push the question of indigenous people's issues, push those questions to the background, and let's just focus on those things that, you know, is good for everybody and all boats can rise. So healthcare, I'm getting a handle on that. And Obamacare is, you know, bringing all these new people, poor people of all colors into coverage, you know, and all of that's wonderful. But if that's what we have to look ahead at this late stage, after Breonna Taylor, after Ahmaud Arbery, after the case Wallace, Brother Wallace just the other day, and where the young people and where people are, if that's what we have to look ahead to, is once again pushing some of the particular issues of slavery and of the brutalization of Black and indigenous people back to the background and just working on what's going to raise all boats, that's going to be really problematic. I don't think that's going to work too well this time around. You know, even with Kamala Harris there, I don't think the black folks I know and young white folks I know are going to go for that kind of rhetoric and that kind of inertia. You know, and especially if you get the House and especially if you get the Senate, all in the Democratic column, that they're going to allow that kind of inertia on these issues, or at least I pray they don't allow that kind of inertia. You can do both. Just like you can chew bubble gum and walk, you can do both. You can work on those policy measures, Green New Deal, healthcare, those things that lift everybody's boats, that takes care of everybody. Yes, work on those, but then also let's pass HR 40. Let's have a commission that studies and make recommendations on a program of reparations for people of African descent in this country. Let's do both. That's my thought on that.
All right.
I'm happy to keep this open or break into smaller groups, or say go in peace. Hearing
Okay, wait, I'm just posting the link to everybody so they can get, they can read the whole piece. And she did such a beautiful job of talking about the brutalization of people of color and slaves. It was powerful even for the educated people to read this. So I posted the link. Thank you so much, Dr. Shabazz.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining. And see you next week.
Thank you, everybody. Do you want to have our people interested in going into breakout rooms? I can make that happen.
I'd like to break out with Willard and Brenda just for a few minutes.
Okay, let me set
anybody
that
that
up.
wants to join us talk about reparations.
Oh, good idea.
Should I set up a separate room for that, or we'll just stay here in the hall? Okay.
I just wanted to check in that, you know, things have been moving here locally. We have some of our folks that have started a petition in Amherst and are projecting to create a kind of local racial equity reparations fund. You know, some of the work is moving along there. We're also working to really push the HR 40, getting the whole of the Massachusetts delegation behind it. We only have 2 Congress people that are not involved. Both of our senators are in support of the related Senate bill by Cory Booker, Warren, and Markey. And in our House delegation, all but 2, one of them being our own Congressperson, Richard Neal. So we're really trying to make a push on Richie Neal to get on board with everybody else, or at least explain his reasons why he's the odd Massachusetts congressional delegation member out. It's another guy too named William Keating, who's over around New Bedford and off into that little area too. And I'm working on some of my Cape Verdean friends and others in Keating's district to try to raise the question with Keating. Why aren't you on board with HR 40? But my own personal feeling and push is if we get behind it, and with the victory that's hopefully on the way on Tuesday, that we can really make progress this year. 160 co-sponsors in the House. It only takes 230 or whatever to pass. So we're just like 60 short, and of which include a lot of Democrats who ought to be on board, like Richard Neal. And then we have to see what plays out in the Senate. But what are you all's feelings? What are the kind of main points of push on your end, via New Hampshire, via in Cobra, or just any guidance you might have for us?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shabazz, for putting us on the spot. We really appreciate the opportunity to have to speak to any audience, any chance that we get. Yeah, there is a heightened awareness and much more dialogue around HR 40 than ever before, since it was first introduced at the federal level back in 1988. And Brenda Lett is an officer, board member of a national reparations organization. Maybe she can give us some general background, and I'll talk a little bit more about what's happening in Massachusetts in particular.
Yes, the strategy, of course, is to deal with the legislation around HR 40. The organization of Cobra is really focused on full repair, though. So the legislation is just one piece of it. And we have people who are working all over the US and even some parts of the world that's really dealing with the full repair issue. And a lot of people are not real clear about what that means. So let me just share a little bit about what full repair looks like. it pretty much looks like the end of being treated differently because of the amount of melanin in your skin. And that's huge. So legislation doesn't really do that. A change in the people's mindset has to do that.
We lost your audio.
We're back.
Okay. For us, it's not.
You might not
It's
realize
not-
that we are represented by Jim McGovern instead of.
That's true. We're McGovern.
So Jim McGovern, and he's
Fully
usually
supports.
top of the heap. Right.
Yep.
So I was talking a little bit about full repair, and it pretty much deals with the since the ending of being treated like a second-class citizen. And legislation doesn't do that. A change in the people's mindset has to do that. So that's the beginning, is changing the way that people are treated on their jobs, in the grocery stores, wherever we are. We have the tendency to be treated like second-class citizens. So that's the first piece. Stop doing that. And then the second is the repair and the restoration for the enslavement of African people who were brought here against their will, minding their own business, brought here and pretty much helped build this country, and pretty much helped build this country. So we really feel the need to be compensated for that, for the work that our ancestors did. And we also tend to not be able to move forward in advancement on jobs that we may have. We are looked over again, even though it's 2020, we're still disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19, the criminal punishment in terms of the amount of people of African descent who are disproportionately incarcerated across the country. So if you look at health, you look at employment, you look at education, those actually are our injury areas. And the largest one is our peoplehood. Our peoplehood and our culture, our way of looking at things, doing things has always been in question. We are often told how what we're doing is not the right thing to do. And then lo and behold, some European person may end up doing it very similar to us and claiming it as their own. So these are kinds of things that we're looking at when we start talking about full repair. And we know that it can't probably all happen in this generation. Willard and I are fortunate enough to have grandchildren. And, you know, the likelihood of it happening in their generation, because it's been going on for over 400 years.
Yeah, so in terms of that discussion around, and it was talked about earlier, one of the challenges that we face is that we live in a society, a culture in a society that is very low context. So when we talk about something like reparations, it's usually commodified into some kind of a transactional relationship where we got to give you something, and what us have to give something of ours to the other. And in the international definition of reparations, there are 5 areas that speak to what comprises reparations, and reparations actually means repair, you know. And so there is work to be done by both communities and within both communities. But the purpose of reparations is not punishment, it's repair. And so in addition to the HR 40 or House Resolution 40 that's in Congress, and Senate Bill 1083, which is a companion bill that's in the Senate, that's asking for both a review or study of the conditions and the impact of African chattel slavery and the vestiges of that system on people of African descent and society at large. There's also a component of those bills that says that it also needs to propose remedies to address the problems that exist. We see all, but coming while this happened at the federal level, and it's been, and as I mentioned, I think around 1988, the first bill was introduced by John Conyers in the Congress. It was based on a bill that Bill Owens, Senator Bill Owens of Massachusetts, had introduced into the Massachusetts legislature, which was some of the first post-Reconstruction reparations legislation. And that bill was the basis of what Conyers did. And now across the country, there are several states at the state level who've taken the initiative to draft reparations legislation at various levels. California, off the top of my head, California, Vermont, Pennsylvania is in process. New York is in process. I think maybe North Carolina might actually be in process as well. In addition to that, and to state level legislation, there are also municipal ordinances that have come, increasingly into play. We saw it in North Carolina. We saw it in Evanston, Illinois. Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island is flirting with maybe coming up with something. So there's been a significant groundswell of interest in reparations, and there are opportunities for people to be involved at any one of these levels. Because part of the challenge, one of the major challenges that reparationists of African descent have identified, these 5 injury areas, which includes peoplehood, culture as an injury area, education, health as injury areas, criminal punishment, because the belief is that there is no criminal justice for people of African descent in this in the current system, criminal punishment, and wealth and poverty. That also has its roots in the capitalist system and its ongoing impact in the way that it operates up until today. So I appreciate Brother Shabazz, you giving us this opportunity and the message that you were bringing. I'll stop there so you have a little time for a few more questions.
I put a few things in the chat, as well as Tom has mentioned that we are, he and Alan Davis are putting out a letter to op-ed on Richard Neal, hopefully trying to, and we've had people individually trying to reach out to him as well, but so far we're not getting any response. So we're going to try to touch it up a little bit with a public letter, and then to keep the pressure going from there. In Amherst, again, the Jewish community has a Zedek racial justice initiative. We've been talking with them. They're getting on board with reparations. They're getting on board with some other areas locally. So, working on that mindset piece is so important, as you said, Brother Willard, and that's where we're trying to break down the idea of repair, reparations as about repair, about harm reduction, about building a stronger community. And so we're getting some support there. I put also that on, in terms of UUs, I don't know nationally what may be afoot, but I did see a link from a couple of years ago, some work locally on the ground that was being done in Tulsa, supporting the reparations for community there. We recently did on Amherst Media a Difficult Dialogue TV program with Reverend Robert Turner, the pastor of historic Vernon AME Church. This is a church that was ground zero of the destruction of the Greenwood community in Tulsa. People talk a lot about the Black Wall Street, but it was an entire community. The churches, the businesses, everything was devastated. But there was a little bit of the basement that survived. And when historic Vernon AME rebuilt, they built on it. And so they have a marker. They're saying that this was the last thing standing. And so next year is the 100th anniversary of the race massacre in Tulsa. Our own Senator Elizabeth Warren has a bill to acknowledge in the Senate, to acknowledge the centennial anniversary of this tragedy. And it's a powerfully written bill. I encourage you to look at it. Go on congress.gov and look for her bill on the Tulsa Race Massacre. Haven't seen where it's picked up many co-sponsors yet, so it's gonna probably need, after the election, hopefully there'll be another push around it, and we can get that passed. It doesn't give any money. It doesn't do anything. It's just a Senate level, a federal level acknowledgement of the commemoration of the centennial of the race massacre. But I do see that on the ground, UUs in Tulsa have been active, been involved in helping. Any questions, any updates, anything from within the UU community in Franklin County or beyond that you all might have about any of these issues? Yeah. Well,
yeah, let me jump in and say that at the UUA national level, many of you will be familiar with the recently issued report from the Commission on Institutional Change, Widening the Circle of Concern. If you haven't seen it, check the UUA website. It's a pretty profound piece of work, and in it actually raises the issue of reparations within the context of the Unitarian-Universalist Association. And there's also a companion study action guide that goes with the report.
I would just mention that our own State Senator Joe Comerford is working with a group of us from Western Massachusetts and Willard on a state reparations bill, so that is also in process, and that also Representative Paul Mark is giving his support to that. So that's also happening locally for a state bill and an apology for slavery.
Hi, Molly. Thanks for chiming in with that.
Okay.
And I might make another addition. We're sorry not to have John Waite on today because he might announce that the Franklin County CDC just got $800,000 for an initiative, an anti-racism initiative that's got an economic base behind it. And if you drive into Greenfield and you're right in the center of Greenfield, the biggest bank in town is covered with these big posters that say racism is not, what does it say? Racism is not tolerated in our community. It's surrounded, the bank is surrounded by these huge posters.
Wow.
And that is because there has been so much work done already. I mean, so much work in the town, right? But, there are other people that should make more comment on things that are going on.
In Massachusetts, there is also a bill that was introduced into the legislature late, but it's still up by Senator Collins and I believe Representative Martinez. I don't have the bill number off the top of my head. Reparations is not in the title, but when you read the body of the bill and the work that it's proposed to do is very similar to that of the other reparations bills.
Representative Bud Williams out of Springfield has a bill he introduced over the summer that has more like racial equity in the title, but in the press, he's called it an initial step toward reparations. It involves diverting close to $1 billion from like the rainy day fund into a kind of racial equity, racial justice fund that would also deal with groups researching inequities. So for example, the inequities in asthma in the state, asthma rates and asthma emergency room admissions. Well, if you got a clear documented disparity where African Americans say are being most acutely affected, you could apply to this racial justice fund for remedy work that you're going to do or that you're doing that needs support. So that's the way I understand it. I had him speak on our Difficult Dialogues TV about it a little bit, but that's another kind of related one that's also in in the House right now. Well, I just wanted to check in with you all, and we'll keep you posted. The book Tom and I are looking to get out soon, and maybe there'll be a reading group or something. Some of you all might want to take a look at it and see. Thank you, Carolyn. We're really just trying to provide those examples, those models of becoming anti-racist, of being anti-racist, that you know, young and old can read, can hopefully be a little touched by, be a little inspired by. Tom, you want to say anything?
I don't see Tom now.
He's there.
Oh, there he is. Oh, there he's sort of in the dark there.
I don't know if he's hearing. Are you hearing us, Tom? You want to say a word or two? Tom and I are also colleagues in something called Bridge for Unity. Our founder, Deborah Snow, co-owner of the Blue Heron restaurant, was in the meeting earlier, our service earlier. Tom, do you hear us?
It looks like he does, and he's not muted on my end.
Okay.
Oh, he looks like he's typing in the chat.
Well, I was too.
So we might, I don't know if, am I muted?
No, we hear you.
No, I can hear.
Oh, okay. Well, the halls are on, and maybe they would want to say something about what's going on in Turner's Falls and what they've been coping with, because it's been a major part of the social justice work. And so I don't know if y'all want to say something about that.
Yes, hi. My two grandsons who who went to Turner's Falls Middle School was getting harassed with racial slurs and so forth. This had been going on for a long time. Yeah, I mean years before they even got there. But their parents, my son and my daughter-in-law, were not putting up with it. So they had meetings with the principal, who is no longer there. And also we spoke with the school committee and explained to them what was going on. And a lot of them didn't even know that this problem was going on. And it got so bad to the point where my grandsons didn't even want to go to school. And so my son and daughter-in-law got got members of the brown and black parents together, and they addressed and they brought it before the principal and the school committee. Nothing much was done, because I mean they were used to doing this, and like I had said before, this had been going on for a long time. So the principals, the counselor that was there, basically everybody that was involved in the cover-up of this has left. They are no longer there. Also, my grandchildren no longer go to that school, and the school that they go to now, they really like it. The whole atmosphere is just, and my daughter-in-law used to work at that school. She no longer works there. She is a teacher somewhere else now. So we really don't know how the climate is there now, because we aren't involved, with it. So I mean, that's but basically, I mean, I really can't really say what has happened, if kids are still getting harassed or not,
My daughter-in-law is now on the school committee.
Yeah, the sort of, so she kind of, knows, bits and pieces, but, but, I really can't speak to that, and it's, it was a difficult, trying time, because, as a grandparent, you don't want to see your grandchildren or your children have to go through something like that because of the color of their skin. And it was very frustrating and infuriating to me that in 2020, we were still dealing with this. And it seems like a lot of whites, because they don't deal, they don't have to deal with this. They don't have to tell their sons, when you go out, be careful. If you are stopped by the police, be careful. Don't say anything. In fact, even when they walk out the door, you worry. And so if it's not happening to them, it's not happening. All you have to do is just look around you, look at the news, read the newspaper. It's every day. This is happening to us every single day.
The difference is that we've
What, Dick?
we have raised our sons so that they're capable of speaking up for themselves, acting on their own, teaching their sons and daughter to do the same. So I think as parents, it would be whole other generations coming up now, some of which don't attend church, but however are still very active in community, care about their fellow man, and pushing the so-called liberal agenda forward now. I think the thing that we missed out are the labels. The next generation is more concerned with labels about conservative versus liberal than they are Republican and Democrat. We missed the point.
I'm so sorry to hear of those actions happening there. Know that you have our solidarity. I wonder if, to some extent, the changing of the mascot from Indians to Thunder may be sparking or emboldening. I'm wondering how some of the leadership in Turner Falls has worked to try and bring the community along, the high school community, the larger community along on the need to examine the bigotry and to examine the disparities. And finally, I'm reminded, as you spoke, how in the last debate between Biden and Trump, the question of the talk, the wonderful moderator that night, she brought up the talk that African-American parents have to have with their children. And I was just floored in listening. Really, neither of them gave very strong responses. At least Biden was a little more pointed, but Trump was just totally trash.
I know. Yeah, he is. I mean, he doesn't, I mean, he's, and what I cannot understand is how people, seeing how he was doing his campaign and the things that he has said about people of color and how they could still vote for him.
I'm afraid I do see why they do it, because
I see it too.
Since 1964, the general Caucasian population of the United States has never voted for a Democratic Civil Rights Act that Johnson put forward. That's just the honest truth.
Yeah,
There's no way to walk around it.
yeah, yeah. And then, of course, when Obama got elected, you know, people said, okay, racism in this country is gone. And even people around the world in Europe, they were saying, okay, this is great, you know. And then when he got elected a second time, you know, people were saying, oh yeah, well, you know, we don't have to worry about racism, you know. But they don't understand that the majority of whites did not put Obama in office.
In the first place.
In the first place. You know, it was Blacks and Latinos that did it.
If I had to say that we're sick and tired of being the conscience of America.
America, yeah.
It seems like America always comes around to our way of thinking, but it's after a lot more of our deaths.
Deaths.
And more
atrocities. Yeah.
And we're just simply sick of it.
Yeah, we're just tired of it. You know. But Dr. Shabazz, I really enjoyed your talk today, you know, and you know, I look forward to hearing you again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
So good to see both of you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, and thanks again.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, because you brought out a lot of things that need to be said, and that a lot of America isn't ready to hear. Yeah. They want to deal with slavery, you know, and but it's a terrible thing in our history, and it needs to be dealt with now so we can move forward.
Well, I think that what struck me about Dr. Shabazz about your sermon was the last, 5 minutes talking about the way that we've let ourselves not have common cause. I think the unity of oppression of everybody who has less than $400 in the bank is one of the ways that you build support for reparations, and the fact that this society is so much more productive than it was in the 1980s, but none of that additional productivity went to the people who perform or the mass of the population. That's where I have some hope. But thank you, Gene, and thank you, Dick.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Are y'all familiar with a Dr. Eddie Moore Jr.?
I've heard of him. Yeah, I've heard of him.
Let's see if I can share screen. No.
I'll give you that. Just a second.
Oh, it's just a little thing, only to say that the piece there that I was reading, thank you, about the UU, the person that was commenting, saying that UUs have kind of fallen into the trap of beating up on the poor whites in order to be allies with blacks. Somewhere we've got to dismantle that. I've met Eddie Moore. He's a brilliant Brooklyn brother, and I appreciate what he's done with the conference that he's organized, the National White Privilege Conference, and his work with the Privilege Institute. But I have to confess that while up here I get the white privilege concept, and I understand it's analytically its importance, I do worry that I don't see the same energy being put forward to explain how that concept works at every level of the class division, to understand the poor white person or the working class white person who doesn't feel particularly privileged, or certainly not privileged vis-a-vis the upper crust, the white upper crust. And in our Bridge for Unity group, and interacting, for example, with some members from Kentucky, you know, you can begin to understand how sometimes some of our critiques and some of our rhetoric and some of our concepts don't really fly, because again, we have to account for both things. We have to account for the class division, but we also have to account for the racism. And if you do it where it all seems as though it's all about the racism piece, then yes, that's where someone like this person on the UU website can say, you know, that, morally the UU church has lost its way. It's, you know, it's in its efforts to be progressive and allies, it's now forsaken the poor white folks. And we got to have a better answer to that.
First 18 years of my life in Mercantile, West Virginia. My father's a coal man. I know exactly. They've been lied to, put upon. That's not bad enough. It's been accelerated. They've been made to feel that somehow they not only lost their way, the country has lost its way, but that no one, particularly people in power, care about them at all. They come down to West Virginia, they promise the moon, they deliver nothing but more pain to the population and division. And that's happened under the influences of the administrations of both Democrats and Republicans. And that's why I made my point about the liberal versus conservative is as more important to the next generation rather than party labels.
True. True.
I'd like to offer that, you know, even in the discussion today, we are using a paradigm that is producing what it was created to produce. This idea that divides the human family into these different categories that we call race was designed to separate folk. So when we talk about Europeans who are, you know, poor and struggling, they don't see privilege. They just feel like, hey, I'm having a human experience. What are you talking about, privilege? Well, we all are having a human experience, except for based on melanin content, people of African descent are relegated to being perceived as subhuman. And so, you know, in this, until we can sort of come around to, I put something in the chat and somebody was saying, oh yeah, we need to do the stuff that Trump just issued a executive order banning, which is like the 1619 Project and other kinds of historical information that talks about what happened in a way that doesn't glorify the existing, you know, social structure. We have to, I mean, all of us have to adopt that. Someone put something in the chat talking about slaveholders, and I responded, no, not slaveholders, enslavers. We got to, you know, really up a narrative that decodes and sort of provides the information in a way that allows for people to be able to see themselves, you know, as well as see others.
Could I add something?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So I think we really want to see if we can get a little bit closer to the truth. So if we really want to be truth seekers, this whole concept of people of color, as if the white is not a color, which means now you excluded from the people of color thing, is what is that? And then we're not these colors. Willard and I are not Black, and many of the people on the call are not white. We are shades of pink, we're shades of brown. So these names that are used to describe us end up defining us in a way that continues to separate us. So we need to kind of look at changing the language, how we talk about racism, which is real.
At the same time, changing the reality.
You know, it's like that BIPOC acronym just sort of popped up this year. And when it first popped up, I'm like, okay, here's the newest flavor. But I likewise didn't, I just rather say black and brown bodies, or I rather say black and indigenous, or whatever I got to say, because all of those things encompass so many different groups that they each, if you want to be just, you got to give each of them their opportunity to have space. And so all of the different flavors of black, Haitian, Jamaican, Kathleen's still here, historical African-American, you know, Cape Verdean. I mean, we've got all kind of flavors up under black that we have to reconcile. You know, under indigenous, of course, there are, you know, many nations and sovereign people. Biden was asked on an NAACP event about reparations, and he just breached, you know, knee-jerk saying, well, unless the Native Americans are included. I don't know about that. We got to include it. And, you know, and it sometimes come up as I'm giving talks about Native Americans. And I have to say, well, hold on. Who are Native Americans? You know, you got to talk about the individual sovereign nations and what those individual sovereign nations' present reality is vis-a-vis the US government. And what are they demanding? And so I'm not going to go out here and imposing that we've got to have a conversation about Native American reparations. That's not for me to do. That's not my place to do. Okay? We can individually, we should talk to the specific nations we want to talk to. The Lakota Sioux, the Comanche, the Apache, the, you know, different reservations that I've been, different places that I've been, nations that I've walked. You'd have to talk to those individual sovereign countries, sovereign peoples, about what are their concerns, what are their issues, what are their fights. The Wampanoag right now not being acknowledged, and in their land on Martha's Vineyard and so on, in the Cape being dispossessed. You know, these are things that we can, but you have to talk on the specific people and not just aggregate folks and talk about Native American reparations. I was so disappointed when Biden responded like that, because first of all, it was a deflection from talking about the real question. But then number two, it was an unfortunate deflection, because it goes into a direction that shows his own backwardness as far as I'm concerned. But that's my 2 cents on that.
I'll say one thing more. Those of us who are to our language would be much better off. Much better off. Just our own language should be inclusive. I have to say, those of us who happen to be, those who are Native American, white, Caucasian, Italian, you name it, it's more inclusive to say, rather than to separate each other in our very language. That's ridiculous.
That's it. That's it. Well, we got started at 10:30. This has been lovely. What y'all got for me to eat around here?
That is what's missing in the virtual world, is donuts, Danish, and cupcake, and lots of coffee.
And some fried chicken. I need some fried chicken right now. No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on by.
Come on by.
Some tempeh, some tofu or something.
Someday.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabazz and Willard and everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Thank everybody and all the people who are watching us on YouTube. And I'd like to remind you, if you want to forward, if you heard something here today and you'd like to share it with someone, it will be on YouTube. It takes them it takes them half a day to really get it together. But the live stream on YouTube will be up there, certainly by tomorrow or the day after. So you can get that link and forward it to your friends, and we'd appreciate that.
Well, I hope it all goes. I hope people, had a good service. I certainly enjoyed being here.
And we enjoyed having you. And Willard, thank you for all the work you do in the New England region, and we're hoping to see you again soon.
Thank you, Dr. Shabazz.
Thank
Good
you.
to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jean. Good to see you, Dick.
Yes.